smile.
One of the profound teachings of Jesus found in all the Gospels, which we hear today, is what we read already on Friday, I think, where Jesus says, if you want to be a follower of mine, you must deny yourself, pick up your cross, and follow me. So that is, I think, one of the greatest or the most profound teachings about discipleship, of our call to being disciples, to pick up our cross, deny ourselves, and follow Jesus. And today we hear Jesus in John's Gospel. He doesn't just say, deny yourself, pick up your cross, but he gives an analogy of a seed that has to be sown, that unless a seed dies, and that is what Jesus means in Matthew's Gospel, in Luke's Gospel, in Mark's Gospel, saying we have to deny ourselves. And if you come to think about it, about a seed, okay, if we stay with this analogy of Jesus about a seed that is being planted or a seed that is not planted, we realize that a seed that is not planted will stay like that it will stay like that for forever, unless it's destroyed by something or it's eaten up by ants or eaten up by another bird or anything. But if you leave a seed like that, it will stay like that. But then when you plant it, you imagine what the seed has to go through in order to produce a shoot and then a plant. That at some point, if you go to check to see if the seed is still there, you realize the seed in itself that was planted has completely disappeared. And I remember when we were in basic formation, somebody gave us, one of the priests during his recollection, made us to contemplate on what takes place in the soil when the seed is planted. The loneliness, the cold, the darkness, the fact that when it's watered, it feels weight, there is nothing that can close it, and then at some point, it has to disintegrate, that the roots begin to come out of its own body and then totally destroys the seed. And the pain that it has to go through in order to die to itself, and that pain becomes the source of life. That the seeds germinate, it has to go through all that process. That at some point if the seed has some intelligence, it will say, no, I don't want to go through that process. I just want to remain myself. And Jesus says, unless we become like the seed that accepts to be planted, that accepts to die, then we are not going to produce any fruits. But also remember that whatever thing the seed goes through does not come from itself. It's because of the external forces. There are things that happen to the seed that it has no control over once it's planted, that makes it to yield abundant fruits. Therefore, it does not become just one seed, but then it produces thousands and thousands of seeds. Okay, and if you continue planting those seeds, then we have the produce. The world continues today because there is a multiplication, and our lives as Christians are meant to be that multiplication. We're meant to be like that little boy who dies to himself and says, "I have these 5 loaves of bread. It is my lunch for today, but I'm going to die to it. I'm going to give it out." And then in giving it out, Jesus blessed it and did not only feed him, but also fed 5,000 other people. That is what it means to die to ourselves. What it means is that it's no longer about ourselves. Remember, the seed does not make itself to decay and all that. It depends on external forces and external things that are going to happen to it that makes it to germinate and then to produce, to become a tree and to produce more other seeds. Therefore, when we say we are dying to ourselves, it means it is no longer about me. It is no longer about what I want. That it is true, we are going to pray and say, because the question is, if God is going to be about God's will, why do we have to pray? And God is going to have his way anyway. It's about what Jesus did in the Garden of Gethsemane. He said, Lord, if you can take this cup away from me, Let it not be my will, but your will be done. Meaning that we are going to pray and ask for things. We are going to still present to God what we want in prayer. But then we must realize it's not just about what we want. It's about God's will. It's about what God wants for us. And therefore, my dear friends, it is a call for us, like Saint Lawrence, whose feast day we celebrate today, who did not regard his life as anything insofar as he had God. He said, even if I die, I know being a witness to the gospel is going to yield abundant fruits. Therefore, my body is nothing compared to what God has promised for me, compared to what God, the crown that God has promised to put on my head. Therefore, I am going to accept death willingly. Therefore, I'm going to accept God's will willingly. And this is what it means to die to ourselves. And St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians, some Corinthians came to him and they said to him, what is going to happen, and what do you mean by the resurrection? What do you mean by dead bodies being raised? And when the bodies are being raised, is it going to be glorified? How will the bodies look like? 1 Corinthians chapter 15 from verse 35, it says that. And in verse 36 it says, "Oh, you foolish Corinthians, don't you know that a seed has to die in order to germinate and produce fruits? Don't you know that you have to die in order to rise up again? And therefore, the path to the resurrection is death. The path to many blessings is that we die to ourselves." That is one part of this gospel. The other part is what St. Paul talks about already in the first reading from 2 Corinthians, where he says, when we sow sparingly, we are going to receive sparingly. That we must be able to look at other people. It's no longer about ourselves again. That we have to be generous in everything that we do. That we don't only look at ourselves, not just pray for ourselves or focus our Christian life towards our self-holiness. We must remember that God, in Matthew's Gospel even, it says, you are the light of the world, that your light must shine so that other people may benefit from it. In other words, we must live our lives for others. Our lives must light up the life for others. Our lives must be an example for others. So we don't just live an isolated life. We must realize that whatever thing we do is going to either positively or negatively influence the people who witness us. And therefore, we must not live life like, oh, it's my life. I don't care whatever anybody thinks about it. No, you have to care because you are not living an isolated life. People are watching. People are seeing whatever thing you do. And as Christians, therefore, we must always be authentic and try to do the things that we know if anybody sees is going to witness to Christ, is going to be converted, is going to change his way of life, is going to say, I want to be like this person. And therefore, St. Paul says in his first letter that we must therefore die to ourselves, leave our comfort zones, and be able to be there and do things that are going to benefit other people, not just benefiting us. And therefore, my dear friends, Jesus calls us today through the through the example and the life of St. Lawrence, that we must be able to die to ourselves. It's no longer about ourselves, but about what God wants for us. Let us therefore ask Him through the intercession of St. Lawrence that we may truly sacrifice our lives for the greater glory of God and for the good of other people.
Kiss us, mother, kiss your children. Bring God's blessings from above. With your mantle blue enfold us in your gentle holy love. See the darkness dissipating, hear the trumpet echoing, Satan's rage